Welcome to Onion Theory, the series where we peel back the layers of the modern data and AI stack. We go beyond the buzzword and hype to unpack what's really happening inside enterprise data teams, how they build, scale, and adapt when the pressure's on. No slides, no fluff, just honest conversations with people doing the work. Let's start with the goal: self-service analytics, the idea that anyone in the business can access and analyze data themselves without waiting on engineering. On paper, brilliant. In practice, often a mess. And on the other side, you've got governance, structure, control, and auditability, all essential in enterprise environments. But when it's too rigid, nothing moves. So today we are asking, why do business want self-service data analytics? Why do they need governance? And how do we stop treating them as mutually exclusive? Having said that, let me welcome you episode 1 of Onion Theory. I'm Reginold from Cloudion. Each episode, I'll be joined by technical leaders, architects, and practitioners to dig into the hard-won lessons behind modern data and AI delivery. Today, I'm joined by Rohit, a senior data engineer at Cloudion, who's worked across some of our biggest enterprise accounts on ETL, modernization, governed self-service, and platform automation. Rohit, welcome.
Thanks, Reggie. It's great to be here. And I have been on both sides of the challenges, like lockdown, engineering bottlenecks,
Great.
as well as uncontrolled self-service chaos. And I'm
Right.
happy to unpack that with you today.
Awesome. Rohit, let's start with what's become the default goal in a lot of organizations.
Okay.
Self-service analytics, it's easy to see the appeal. Give people direct access to the data. Let them move faster and reduce engineering backlogs. But I want to dig deeper here. Is this just about speed and cutting tickets, or is there something bigger behind the push for self-service? What's really driving it from a business point of view? Let's start with self-service. Why is this so attractive to the business? Is it just about speed, or is there more to it?
So yes, self-service enables faster decision making and responsiveness. For example, let's say a retail pricing team wants to adjust discounts based on daily sales performance, right?
Right.
Traditionally, what they would do is they will have to go to the data team and ask them for a report. But with self-service dashboard powered by Delta tables in Databricks or even your Synapse tables,
Right.
they can easily track the sales trends in real time and adjust their offers on the same day.
Right.
And what this does is this will reduce any missed revenue opportunities. Now, although there are many tools that offer the same thing, but also with the advent of tools like Prophecy and other visual drag and drop tools, we can easily build and update the pipeline that refreshes the pricing data set, for example,
Right.
without the need of coding, and you don't have to wait for any delays.
Wow.
So what will automatically happen is it can run Spark jobs on Databricks if you are concerned about that, but the logic is completely owned by us
Right.
and modified by the business analyst, like directly via the Prophecy canvas. The other thing that it does is by the advantage of self-service, I would say, is like it reduces the dependency on central engineering team for basic analytics.
Wow.
Like for example, let's say at one client, the demand planning team used to raise tickets just to get their inventory data filtered by warehouse category. So what they'll have to do is we are enabling them to use a parameterized ADF pipeline with drop-down filters. Why?
That's-
Because again and again they'll have to come to us for each and every small request, right? So again, the dependency factors come into the picture.
Great.
So this one particular change saved the data team dozens of tickets per month, and let planners, you can completely put it on them to work directly with trusted data sets.
Right.
So what we are doing here is we can create some reusable parameterized components
Okay.
for filtering, aggregating your inventory data, for example. So planners now what they have to do is they just have to drag and drop configure filters visually, or if you want to code them, that is also possible.
Right.
So what happens is no more waiting on engineering or any routine changes that may come into the picture. So what this also does is the third point that I would like to highlight here
Right.
is that it will empower analysts and business users to explore ideas without delay. So let's say if I have to take an example in Databricks,
Right.
what we usually do is we give analyst a governed workspace where they can completely come in, join, let's say for example, product, sales and weather data to test the hypothesis for, let's say they are doing regional marketing.
Right.
So they don't need to do any custom joins based on what engineering tells them to do, right?
Right.
So some experiments will obviously fail, but that led to a 12% lift in regional sales in our case.
Correct.
So this agility would have been lost with a ticket-driven workflow, right? So with the advent of, again, I'm adding this visual tools perspective into the flow because that is a necessity as of now. And as you're able to visualize these data sets as they are joining,
Right.
and preview the output at every step rather than coding and waiting for the final analysis to come to your rescue, you can iterate at each and every step, adjust the logic. So behind the scenes, Spark can generate the code, give engineers confidence, while analysts can stay in the flow.
Right.
Again, so the fourth point can be it can also encourage creativity and a data driven culture.
Right.
So let's say for example we noticed that once businesses teams had access to these reusable pipeline components in Prophecy, they started asking some better questions.
Okay.
So they were not just focused upon what was the revenue, but what pattern do we see by the time of the day or geography. So these questions also come into the picture.
Correct.
So this tooling changed the conversation, right? It unlocked curiosity and ownership. So there are some tools that again offer modular visual design components and which can enable cross-functional teams to experiment and structurally think about the data.
Right.
So it can build your foundational components, and business users recombined these data sets to explore more ideas.
Correct.
Without breaking anything, right? But the important point to note here is all of this can go into the drain without any guardrails, and it can completely lead to chaos.
Okay.
The factors that can come into play is like spreadsheets come into the picture, ad hoc data, duplication, inconsistent KPIs, and this ultimately generates lack of trust.
Right.
In one project recently that we did is before we introduced proper data governance, every department had its own version of customer data set.
Correct.
Some from Excel reports, others from SQL in notebooks. So the result being there are 5 different teams now having different customer counts in the very same meeting.
Right.
Only after moving to Unity catalog or things like where we can have a single source of truth as a data set or certified gold tables, which are ultimately used for analytical purposes. So we are re-establishing that trust and maintaining that consistency.
Right.
So basically, as all pipelines become Git managed and we are easily able to track lineage, of course, there are some tools that offer a very visual and a great interface to track all the lineages very efficiently.
Correct.
So we can see where each and every pipeline is being reused and rebuilt. So analysts can build with governed templates, the point being, and teams can reuse the certified components
Okay.
that point to the same goal tables, right? So the visual interface doesn't bypass any governance, it can actually enforce it.
So ironically, the very thing that's meant to empower teams can end up fracturing the entire data landscape.
Yeah, exactly. So once teams see different numbers for the
Right.
same metric, confidence will completely disappear.
Correct.
And rebuilding the trust can take far longer than putting the right guardrails in place from the start.
Right. So that's the case for speed and freedom. But we all know what happens when things scale without structure. Let's shift to the other side of the equation, governance. A lot of teams treat governance as a blocker. But when it's done right, it's what makes the whole system sustainable.
Right.
So let me ask you this. What does good governance give a business that self-service alone can't? And where do you see the cracks form when it's missing or mishandled?
Yes. So governance ensures reliability, traceability, and compliance.
Right.
Okay. So if I have to explain this, it will help ensure your data is accurate, auditable, and most importantly, if it is used correctly across teams. So let's say, for example, in a financial institution, every transformation step on customer data needs to be auditable. Governance frameworks ensure all of these steps that we put in. They will ensure that no step is going undocumented. That is very important. And maintaining trust and compliance is a plus. So another point that governance would cover is it is essential in regulated industries.
Correct.
Like we need to track and access the data lineage, which is the most important part. And if I have to explain with example, industries like healthcare, banking, and insurance must compulsorily show who accessed the data, what was the data about, and how it was used.
Correct.
For let's say GDPR compliance, if I have to take a very precise example, GDPR compliance, companies must stress how personal data was accessed, how was it sourced, transformed, and accessed again. So without lineage, this becomes nearly impossible. And talking about reusability in this particular case is very important. How does this relate to lineage? Again, the point being is that uh, when we are working as a cross-functional team, when many and many different organizations have access to the same data, we need to correctly pinpoint whether one particular data set has been used across several teams, and that is only possible wherein we can manage and track the lineage.
Right.
And we can ensure that this data set is particularly used in these many multiple pipelines. Just the reason being, we can completely avoid silos. Else, what would happen? The data is being sourced from one particular, let's say, warehouse or a lakehouse, or let's say your ADF location. Then again, if different teams create their own refined versions or their own default architectures, then it becomes completely useless if we
Right.
are creating silos for the same source of information, right? So again, coming to the next point is like governance allows platforms to scale without chaos. Okay. So as more teams build pipelines, governance prevents duplication and conflicting definitions and the runaway complexity. So let's say if you are combining Prophecy with a Databricks' Unity catalog, each dataset can have their own certified version, making it easier to share across departments without confusion.
Right.
But again, traditional governance models can become blockers, like centralized teams, bottlenecks, and ticket queues. So the rigid top-down governance often slows teams down, and this will ultimately, you can say, discourages innovation. Okay.
Correct.
So let's say at one client, if we have to add one new column, for example, in your existing table. So again, I will have to create a ticket and take it to the central data team.
Right.
This will ultimately delay critical marketing experiments, right? If you want to have completely new report to be built from scratch, then again we will have to add, or let's say that particular column was adding any added benefit, then they will have to ultimately wait for a longer time than required, right?
Right.
So when tools like Prophecy and other drag and drop tools or any other tool for that matter, when they involve governance into their platform, like Git versioning, metadata tracking, and code generation, all of this can happen automatically, wherein the tool will take care of that, allowing teams to move faster without breaking things.
So when governance gets too rigid, people start working around it, and that just defeats the point.
Yeah. So governance, when done wrong, of course, it can become dangerous, and that is something that people avoid instead of something that empowers delivery.
Rohit, all right. So we have seen what happens when you lean too far in either direction. Self-service without structure turns into chaos. Governance without flexibility leads to bottlenecks.
Absolutely.
But most businesses still think it's a choice, one or the other. So I want to challenge that. What does it actually look like when you bring both together, when governance isn't slowing things down but enabling delivery at a scale?
Yes, indeed. The answer is governed self-service. So it's not about choosing between speed or control. It's about designing a system that allows you to do both, or be
Right.
part of the system that will allow you to do both. So what happens is, because of this, teams can innovate quickly within a secure and auditable environment. So that's basically self-service and governance together, or we can call it governed self-service. The point being, analysts can move fast using tools that can enforce standards automatically. So instead of giving analysts the free rein or locking them out, give them tools that guide them very safely.
Right.
And Prophecy is something that does that. So analysts can use these drag and drop components that follow the pre-approved logic. So no risk of rogue SQL being into play.
Correct.
And you don't have to even sacrifice compliance or control to gain that agility. So the use of proper tools in your, let's say, data frames or your data architecture can enforce policies behind the scenes, the proper tools that can do that for you. So users don't have to worry about the compliance being implemented, and IT doesn't need to slow things down automatically.
Right.
So let's say lineage, role-based access controls, and audit logs, all handled automatically in platforms like Databricks. So data teams can stay fast and compliant, right? So to enable this practice, to give you an example, Prophecy plus Databricks come into picture together. So in Prophecy would provide you a drag and drop approach tool wherein the computational power for that will be provided to you by Databricks. So Databricks can be used as an execution engine,
Right.
wherein you don't have to worry about the code, and Prophecy will do the drag and drop interface for you, wherein an analyst can use a visual interface to build the pipelines. So what they need to do is they don't need to write the Spark code by line. They just have to focus on the logic, and the code will be taken care of by Prophecy. So it will ultimately write all that code in Spark or the language that you decide to be written in, let's say Python, SQL, and there are many other options that you can use. But by the use of Spark, you can have that code optimized and make sure that your pipelines are running very efficiently.
Right.
So what this makes us do, so let's say if we talk about the mindset shift, is that this will completely boost your productivity and creativity, wherein you are more focused on what you need to do instead of the how, because that's what usually happens when you are using completely code-based environments.
Correct.
So another advantage that I would like to highlight here is the output of that, as I said earlier, is clean Spark code. And again, this is version controlled in Git. So each and every component that you create in Prophecy as a pipeline. So let's say there are data sets that you're using, the components like that you're using to transform your pipelines.
Correct.
Everything is part of the code. And that ultimately can be version controlled in Git, each and every component basically. So all of these engineering best practices will stay intact by the use of this. You're not losing on anything. So engineers, for them, what they can do, let's say in this particular scenario, they can define these components for the analyst, engineers I mean. And patterns, let's say analyst can safely use these patterns.
Right.
Okay. So what this does is, this will give you the guardrails without the engineers to having micromanage the analyst, so that the code doesn't look right and all those things, right? That analysts run into usually with engineers.
Right.
And as everything is running securely on Databricks, let's say with Unity catalog enabled and role-based access control and full lineage. So the things that you're worrying about, like compliance, security, and transparency, are automatically baked in the design. So all in all, to summarize it, when engineers and analysts both trust the system, you can unlock real velocity.
Before we close, I just want to say a big thank you to Rohit for joining me and for breaking this down so clearly. And thanks to you, audience, for tuning in. We know your time is valuable and we are glad you spent it with us. All right, let's bring this home. What's the one thing you want data leaders to take away from this conversation?
Yeah. So the biggest takeaway, if I have to simplify it one line, is that not to fall for the wrong choice. If you architect it right, you can have innovation and control together.
If you're thinking this could solve problems in your own environment, you're probably right. Prophecy is running on Databricks is the next generation solution for governed self-service and enterprise scale data delivery. At Cloudion, we are one of the few SIs who specialize in making that real. Through our innovation lab, we can prove it to you in a matter of weeks with a production-ready POC. If you want a deeper dive, drop us a line or visit us at cloudion.com. That's it for this layer of onion theory. If you got value from today's chat, make sure to subscribe. We've got plenty more coming. Different guests, different themes, but always focused on what actually works in the modern data and AI stacks. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.